My daughter-in-law thought she was just making a simple mistake when she handed me the wrong lunchbox that morning. She thought she was accidentally giving an old construction worker a gourmet meal meant for her husband. But she was wrong. What she actually handed me was the murder weapon she was using to slowly kill my son. And she had no idea that a 70-year-old man with a bad back and calloused hands was about to bring her entire world crashing down. Before I tell you how a box of sushi revealed a conspiracy that almost destroyed my family, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps these stories reach people who need to hear them. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from today? I always love reading your answers. My name is Ben. I am 70 years old, and by all rights I should be sitting on a porch somewhere drinking iced tea and watching the sunset. I should be retired, but life rarely gives you what you should have. Instead, I am sitting on a rusted steel beam 30 stories up, wiping cement dust out of my eyes. My hands are not the hands of a gentleman. They are cracked, stained with grease, and permanently curved from gripping hammers and drills for 50 years. Every morning when I wake up, my lower back screams in protest. It feels like someone is driving a hot railroad spike into my spine. My knees pop and grind with every step. But I get up, I put on my boots, I go to work. I do it because I have no choice. I do it because I am a father. 3 years ago, I had a nest egg. I had $200,000 saved up from a lifetime of sweating in the summer heat and freezing in the winter winds. That was my freedom money. That was the money my late wife Martha and I had scrimped and saved penny by penny. We never went on vacations. We never bought new cars. We saved it so that one day we could rest. But Martha passed away 4 years ago, leaving me alone in a silence that was louder than any jackhammer. And then my son Matt needed me. Matt is a good boy, but he has always been soft. He wanted a house. Not just any house, but a beautiful home in the suburbs for his new wife, Rachel. He looked at me with those puppy dog eyes, the same eyes he had when he was 6 years old, asking for a bicycle, and he told me that he just needed a down payment. He said it was for his future. He said it was for my future grandchildren. How could I say no? I gave him everything. I transferred the entire $200,000 to his account. I thought I was buying his happiness. I did not know I was buying my own slavery. Now I live in a cramped studio apartment that smells like mildew and old pipes. I work double shifts just to pay for my own food and utilities because I do not want to be a burden. I am a ghost in my own life, haunting construction sites to make ends meet. It was a Tuesday. The sun was beating down on us, relentless and cruel. The air was thick with the smell of wet concrete and diesel fumes. The lunch whistle blew a sharp sound that cut through the noise of the city. I groaned as I sat down on a stack of drywall, my joints popping. Next to me sat Miguel. Miguel is my only friend on the crew. He is about my age, a former army medic who saw things in the war that he never talks about. He has eyes that see everything, and a silence that speaks volumes. "Hey, Ben," Miguel grunted, opening his own thermos. "You look like you went 10 rounds with a boxing champion." "I feel like the boxing champion used a sledgehammer," I replied, forcing a smile. I reached for my lunch bag. Usually it is a brown paper sack. Inside there is usually a ham and cheese sandwich on stale white bread, maybe an apple if I am lucky. I pack it myself every night. But today the bag felt different. It was heavy. The fabric was smooth, expensive canvas, not the rough paper I was used to. I frowned and unzipped it. Inside there was no sandwich. Instead, there was a sleek black lacquer box. It looked like something you would see in a movie. I opened the lid and my jaw dropped. It was a bento box. Perfectly arranged rows of fresh salmon sushi, vibrant green seaweed salad, and slices of tender roast beef. It looked like a work of art. "What on earth?" Miguel whistled, looking over my shoulder. "Did you win the lottery, Ben? Or did you finally start dating a chef?" I shook my head, confused. Then it hit me. Rachel. This morning I had stopped by Matt and Rachel's house to drop off some tools Matt needed. Rachel had been in a rush, running around the kitchen in her silk robe, talking on her phone, looking stressed. She had shoved a bag into my hands and said, "Here is your lunch, Dad. Now please, I have a Zoom call." She must have grabbed the wrong bag. This was Matt's lunch. She had given me her husband's gourmet meal, and Matt was probably at his office right now, staring at my dry ham sandwich. Well, I chuckled, picking up a piece of sushi. I guess this is my lucky day. Matt's loss is my gain. I was about to take a bite when I noticed a small compartment in the corner of the bento box. It was a clear plastic container with the days of the week printed on it. A pill organizer. My heart skipped a beat. Of course, Matt. My son was born with a congenital heart defect. His heart is a ticking time bomb. He has to take very specific, very expensive medication every single day at noon to regulate his heart rate. If he misses a dose, his blood pressure spikes, his heart flutters, and he could go into cardiac arrest. It has been our nightmare since he was a baby. I put the sushi down. The hunger vanished, replaced by a cold wave of parental panic. "He does not have his meds," I said, my voice trembling. "Miguel, Rachel gave me his pills. He is at work without them." Miguel leaned in, his expression serious. "That is dangerous, Ben. You need to call him." I reached for my phone, but then I stopped. I looked closer at the pill organizer. Today was Tuesday. The compartment for Tuesday was full. Inside lay a single large blue capsule. It looked like the heart medication I had seen him take 1,000 times. But something was off. I have spent my life working with my hands. I know textures. I know details. I stared at that capsule. The blue color seemed a shade too light, and the casing, it looked slightly uneven, like it had been put together by hand, not by a machine in a sterile factory. "Miguel," I whispered, "look at this." Miguel squinted. He took the pill organizer from my hand. He popped open the Tuesday tab and tipped the blue pill into his palm. He rolled it around. He brought it up to his nose and sniffed it. "It looks like the generic brand," Miguel said, but his eyes narrowed. "No," I said. "Matt does not take generic. Rachel made a huge deal about it last month. She said they put him on a new experimental protocol. Some fancy European medicine that costs $5,000 a month. She said that is why they could not help me with my rent this month. Because all the money was going to this special medicine." Miguel frowned. He took a small pocket knife from his utility belt. With the precision of the surgeon he almost was, he gently sliced the capsule open. White powder spilled out onto his dark, calloused palm. It was not the granular chemical texture of medicine. It was fine, dusty. Miguel dipped his pinky finger into the powder. "What are you doing?" I asked, alarmed. "Do not touch that. It could be potent." Miguel ignored me. He touched the powder to the tip of his tongue. He closed his eyes for a second, analyzing. Then he spat it out onto the ground with a look of disgust and horror. "Ben," Miguel said, his voice low and dangerous. "What is it?" I asked. "Is it poison?" "No," Miguel said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "It is not poison, but it is just as deadly." He looked me dead in the eye. "It is flour, Ben. Just plain white flour mixed with powdered sugar." I stared at him. The construction site noise faded away. All I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears. What I stammered. "That is impossible. It is a placebo." Ben, Miguel said, his face hardening into stone. "This is baking supply. There is no medicine in this pill. If your son has been taking this, he has been taking nothing. Absolutely nothing." I felt the ground sway beneath me. My son, my boy with the weak heart. He thought he was taking a miracle cure. He thought he was being saved. But he was swallowing sugar while his heart struggled to beat. Rachel. The image of my daughter-in-law flashed in my mind. Her perfect smile. Her expensive clothes. The way she always guided Matt to sit down acting so concerned, so loving. The way she handled all his medical appointments because he was too busy working to pay for them. Someone tampered with this, Miguel said. You do not accidentally fill a medical capsule with flour. This was done on purpose. I gripped the bento box until the plastic cracked. A cold fury older and deeper than any anger I had ever felt began to rise in my chest. It started in my gut and spread to my fingertips, numbing the pain in my back. Why, I whispered. Why would anyone give him fake medicine? Miguel looked at me with pity, but he did not sugarcoat it. Ben, if a man with a bad heart stops taking his medicine, he does not just get sick, he dies. And if he dies of a heart attack, it looks like natural causes. No autopsy, no investigation. Just a tragic end for a sick man. He paused. Someone is trying to kill your son, Ben, and they are doing it right under his nose. I stood up. I did not feel 70 years old anymore. I did not feel the arthritis. I felt only the burning need to protect my child. I looked at that expensive sushi lunch, a beautiful disguise for a deadly secret. I grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking not from age but from rage. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to hear the lie before I tore it apart. I dialed Rachel's number. The phone rang once, twice. Hello, Dad, her voice chirped sweet as honey. Did you enjoy the lunch? I am so sorry about the mix-up. I hope you like sushi. I closed my eyes, picturing her face. It is delicious, Rachel, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It tastes just like the truth. I hung up. I looked at Miguel. Pack up, I said. We are leaving. Where are we going? Miguel asked, already standing up. We are going to find out why my daughter-in-law wants me to bury my son. I held the phone to my ear like it was a grenade waiting to explode. My thumb hovered over the end call button, trembling not from the cold, but from the sheer force of the rage boiling in my blood. I wanted to scream. I wanted to roar into the receiver and demand to know why she was poisoning my son with baking supplies. I had the words ready. I was going to call her a liar, a manipulator, a snake. I was ready to tear down the facade she had built around my family. The line clicked open. Hello, Dad. Rachel's voice washed over me, soft and warm like a gentle breeze on a summer day. There was no malice in it, no hesitation. Just the sweet, concerned tone of a dutiful daughter-in-law. Is everything okay, Dad? Did you like the sushi? I hope it was not too much wasabi for you. The scream died in my throat. It choked me. How could a murderer sound so innocent? How could someone doing something so evil sound so incredibly normal? I stood there, surrounded by the noise of jackhammers and shouting men, feeling suddenly small and confused. I gripped the phone tighter. Rachel. I rasped my voice, sounding rough and foreign to my own ears. I opened the lunchbox. I saw the pills. There was a brief silence on the other end. For a second, I thought I had caught her. I thought the mask would slip. But when she spoke again, her voice did not waver. It just dropped to a hushed, confidential whisper. Oh, goodness. You saw the organizer. I am so sorry, Dad. I should have warned you not to touch those. They are part of the new protocol. Protocol 1 repeated the word, tasting like ash in my mouth. Rachel 1 opened one. It is flour. It is just white powder. Why is Matt taking flour instead of his heart medication? She laughed. She actually laughed. It was a light tinkling sound, like I had just said something adorable and naive. Oh, Dad, you are so funny. Of course it looks like flour. It is a bioabsorbable cellulose carrier. Look, I did not want to worry you with the technical details because I know this medical stuff can be confusing. But Matt is seeing a new specialist, Dr. Schneider. He is the top holistic cardiologist in the country. I blinked, looking at the dirty construction site around me. Holistic. Cardiologist. The words felt heavy and expensive. He is doing a total system detox. Rachel continued, her voice picking up speed, sounding confident and knowledgeable. You see, the Western medicine Matt was taking for years was full of toxins. It was keeping him alive, sure, but it was also poisoning his liver. Dr. Schneider has him on a washout cycle. We have to purge the old chemicals from his blood for 1 week so his body is pure enough to accept the new nanomedicine. Nanomedicine. I asked, feeling my anger being replaced by a sinking feeling of stupidity. Yes, Dad. It is revolutionary. It uses microscopic particles to repair the heart tissue rather than just regulating the beat. It costs $5,000 a month. $5,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. That was more than I made in 3 months of breaking my back at this site. Rachel sighed, a sound full of manufactured pity. We did not tell you because we know how much you worry about money, Dad. We know you gave us your savings for the house, and we are so grateful. We did not want you to feel bad that you could not contribute to this. It is very expensive, and honestly, I was afraid you would not understand. I was afraid you would think we were wasting money on magic beans because, well, you are from a different generation. Her words cut deep. You are from a different generation. It was a polite way of saying I was old, obsolete, and ignorant. She was right, wasn't she? I was just a bricklayer. I barely knew how to use a smartphone. What did I know about nanomedicine or holistic detoxes? I was standing there in my dirty work boots accusing a woman who drove a Mercedes and read medical journals. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. Shame washed over me. I had almost accused her of murder because I was too uneducated to understand a detox program. I looked at Miguel, who was watching me closely, and I turned away, unable to meet his eyes. I am sorry, I mumbled into the phone. I did not know. It just looked strange to me. I was worried about Matt. I know you worry, Dad, Rachel cooed. You are a good father. But you have to trust me. I am his wife. Do you think I would ever let anything happen to him? I love him more than my own life. Just put the box away, okay? And please do not mention this to Matt. He is very sensitive about the cost. He feels guilty enough as it is that we are spending this much money while you are living in that apartment. That apartment. The way she said it made my home sound like a sewer. I will not say anything, I promised, my voice barely a whisper. I am sorry, Rachel. It is okay, Dad. Enjoy the sushi. The line went dead. I stood there for a long time, staring at the black screen of my phone. The rage was gone, replaced by a hollow ache in my chest. I felt like a fool, a suspicious, ungrateful old fool. Miguel walked up to me, wiping his hands on a rag. Well, he asked. What did she say? It is a detox, I said, not looking at him. Some new treatment. The powder is a carrier for a new medicine. It costs $5,000 a month. Miguel frowned, his thick eyebrows knitting together. $5,000. For flour. Ben, that sounds like a load of... She is trying to save him, Miguel, I snapped, cutting him off. I was defensive now, desperate to believe the lie because the alternative was too painful to imagine. I am just an old man who does not understand modern medicine. Let it go. I finished the workday in a haze. The sushi tasted like cardboard. Every bite reminded me of my own inadequacy. I was eating a rich man's lunch while my son was paying a fortune for a cure I could not afford to help with. That evening, I took the long bus ride back to my part of the city. The landscape changed from the gleaming glass towers of downtown to the cracked sidewalks and faded brick buildings of my neighborhood. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment, my knees groaning in protest. My apartment is small, just a single room with a kitchenette in the corner and a bathroom that always smells of damp towels. The wallpaper is peeling, and the window looks out onto a brick wall. It is a far cry from the home I raised Matt in. but it is mine. I heated up a can of soup on the hot plate and sat down at the small formica table. Across from me on the wall hung a framed photograph of Martha. It was taken on our 25th anniversary. She was smiling, her eyes crinkled at the corners, looking at me with that look that always said, "I know what you are thinking, Ben." I ate my soup in silence, staring at her face. The silence of the room usually comforted me, but tonight it felt heavy, oppressive. Rachel's explanation had been perfect. It covered every base. It explained the powder. It explained the cost. It explained the secrecy. It even used my own poverty against me to keep me quiet. It was logical. But as I looked at Martha's eyes, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. It was that feeling I used to get on job sites right before a cable snapped or a wall gave way. The gut feeling that defies logic. The instinct of a man who has survived 70 years of hard living. "Martha," I whispered to the empty room, "does that make sense to you?" I thought about Matt. I thought about the last time I saw him 2 days ago. He had come to the door to pick up a package. He looked terrible. His skin was not just pale. It was gray, like old ash. His lips had a bluish tint. He was breathless just from walking to the door. He leaned against the doorframe, sweating, even though it was a cool day. "If this Dr. Schneider is so amazing," I muttered, pushing my soup bowl away, "why does my boy look like he is dying?" I have seen men detox from alcohol. I have seen men detox from drugs. They get sick, yes, but they do not look like their heart is failing. They do not look like they are drowning in their own bodies. And then there was the flour. Miguel was a medic. He knew tastes. He said it was sugar and flour. If this was a medical carrier, why did it taste like a bakery ingredient? Why would a heart specialist prescribe sugar to a cardiac patient? I stood up and paced the small room. The floorboards creaked under my boots. $5,000 a month. Rachel said it was a nanomedicine. But Matt is an accountant. He is meticulous with money. Even if he was sick, would he really agree to spend that much without telling me? He knows I would have sold my truck. He knows I would have taken another loan. Matt never hid financial trouble from me before, unless he does not know. The thought stopped me in my tracks. What if Matt thinks he is taking the medicine? What if Rachel is telling him it is the expensive cure, but she is feeding him baking supplies? I walked over to the window and looked out at the brick wall. A rat scurried across the fire escape. If Matt is not taking his real medicine, his heart is working overtime. Every beat is a struggle. Every day he swallows that flour, he is walking one step closer to a massive cardiac event. And when it happens, everyone will say, "Well, he had a bad heart. It was a tragedy." But at least they tried everything, even the expensive experimental treatment. It was the perfect crime. I looked back at Martha's photo. Her smile seemed to fade, replaced by a look of urgent warning. "I am not a doctor," I said aloud, my voice hardening, "and I may be an old, uneducated bricklayer, but I know when someone is pouring concrete over a rotten foundation." I could not sleep. The doubt was like a splinter in my mind, festering. I needed to know the truth. I could not rely on Rachel's sweet words anymore. I needed to see for myself. I grabbed my jacket. I knew it was late. I knew I had work in the morning. But I had to see him. I had to see my son. "I am coming, Matt," I whispered, grabbing my keys. "And if she is lying to me, God help her, because I will bring this whole world down on her head." I drove my battered pickup truck to the wealthy side of town the next morning. The engine rattled and coughed as I climbed the winding hills of the exclusive gated community where my son lived. Every house here was a fortress surrounded by high hedges and security cameras. The lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives, so green they looked fake. It was a world away from the dusty construction site where I ate my lunch, and light years away from the cramped apartment where I slept. I pulled up to the driveway of the house I had helped pay for. It was a stunning structure, a modern architectural marvel of glass and steel that cost $1.2 million. It was impressive, yes. But as I killed the engine and sat there looking at it, I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature. The house was cold. I do not mean the temperature. I mean the soul of the place. My old house, the one I built with my own hands for Martha and Matt, had creaky floorboards and walls that held the smell of baking bread and sawdust. It was imperfect, but it was alive. This place looked like a museum where nothing was allowed to be touched. The windows were dark, like empty eyes staring back at me. There were no toys in the yard, no garden hose left uncoiled, no signs of life. It was a pristine, sterile tomb. I did not call ahead. I knew that if I called, Rachel would find a reason to keep me away. She would say they were busy, or that Matt was sleeping, or that they had another doctor's appointment. I needed the element of surprise. I needed to see the truth before they had time to dress it up. I walked up the long concrete path to the massive front door. My work boots felt heavy and loud on the expensive stone. I pressed the doorbell, and a melodic chime echoed deep inside the house. I waited and waited. Finally, I heard the lock click. The door swung open. I expected to see the housekeeper, or maybe Rachel with her practiced smile. But it was Matt. My breath caught in my throat. I had to physically restrain myself from gasping aloud. My son stood there in the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame as if his legs could barely support his own weight. He was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, clothes that used to fit him snugly because he was a broad-shouldered man. Now they hung off him like drapes on a skeleton. His skin was the color of wet newspaper. It was gray, clammy, and translucent. I could see the dark veins pulsing weakly beneath the surface of his forehead. Sweat beaded on his upper lip even though the air conditioning inside was blasting. But it was his eyes that scared me the most. They were sunken, rimmed with dark purple circles, and they looked glassy, unfocused. He looked like a man who was already halfway to the grave. "Dad," he wheezed. His voice was a dry rattle devoid of the energy I knew so well. "What are you doing here?" I forced a smile, though my heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. I stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. His skin was cold and damp. "I was just in the neighborhood, son," I lied smoothly. "I wanted to see how you were doing. I have not seen you in a few days." Matt tried to smile, but it looked more like a grimace of pain. He stepped back to let me in, his movements slow and jerky. "Come in," he whispered. I was just going to the kitchen for water." I followed him inside. The interior of the house was just as cold as the outside. White marble floors, white walls, white furniture. It was spotless. There was not a single speck of dust nor a single personal photograph on the mantel. It felt like a hospital lobby, not a home. I watched my son struggle to walk 10 feet to the kitchen island. He was breathing hard, short, shallow gasps like a fish out of water. He gripped the counter with white knuckles, his hands trembling violently as he reached for a glass. "Here, let me get that," I said, rushing forward. I poured him a glass of water and handed it to him. He took it with both hands, the glass shaking so much that water sloshed over the rim. "Thanks, Dad," he murmured, taking a sip. "I am just having a bad day." I watched him drink, my mind racing. I needed to know. I needed to test the story Rachel had fed me. I needed to know if my son was a co-conspirator in his own destruction, or if he was the victim of a lie. I leaned against the counter, trying to look casual, though my pulse was hammering in my neck. "Rachel told me about the new treatment," I said softly, watching his face closely. Matt lowered the glass. He looked confused, his brow furrowed. "New treatment?" he asked, his voice vague. "Yes," I continued, pressing gently. "The detox. The protocol with Dr. Schneider. She said it is tough, but it is going to get you ready for the nanomedicine. I waited. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the labored wheeze of Matt's breathing. Matt stared at me. His eyes were blank. There was no recognition, no spark of understanding. Schneider, he repeated slowly, testing the name on his tongue like a foreign word. Who is Schneider? My blood ran cold. You know, I said, my voice tightening. The specialist. The holistic cardiologist Rachel hired. The one who costs $5,000 a month. Matt shook his head, a weak, wobbly motion. Dad, I do not know what you are talking about, he said, looking genuinely bewildered. I am seeing Dr. Evans, same as always. I am just taking my regular meds. I think the disease is just getting worse. The pills, they do not seem to work anymore. He swayed on his feet, his face twisting in misery. I just feel so tired, Dad. I feel like my battery is draining and I cannot recharge it. I take the medicine every day, but the pain in my chest, it never goes away. The truth hit me with the force of a sledgehammer. He did not know, he had absolutely no idea. Rachel had invented Dr. Schneider. She had invented the detox. She had invented the nanomedicine. It was all a lie fabricated to cover her tracks. She was feeding him flour, watching him deteriorate day by day, and letting him believe that his body was failing him naturally. She was watching her husband die, and she was letting him think it was his own fault. I opened my mouth to speak. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake him. I wanted to scream, "You are eating flour, Matt. Your wife is killing you." But before I could get a single word out, the sharp click-clack of high heels echoed on the marble floor. Well, this is a surprise. I spun around. Rachel was standing in the doorway of the kitchen. She looked immaculate. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her dress a crisp, expensive linen. She looked like the queen of this ice castle. But her eyes were not smiling. They were hard, cold flints of steel drilling into me. She walked over to Matt, her movements fluid and predatory. She placed a hand on his back, not in a comforting way, but in a possessive, controlling way. "Dad, you should have called," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness that did not reach her eyes. "You know Matt needs his rest. He is very fragile right now." I looked at her, and for the first time I did not see my daughter-in-law. I saw a monster in human skin. "I was just asking him about the treatment, Rachel," I said, keeping my voice steady, though my hands were clenched into fists at my sides. "He seems confused about Dr. Schneider." Rachel did not flinch. She did not even blink. She just turned her gaze to Matt, her expression shifting instantly to one of patronizing pity. "Oh, honey," she cooed, stroking Matt's arm. "You are having one of your brain fog episodes again. Remember what we talked about. The toxins affect your memory. Dr. Schneider is the consultant working with Dr. Evans. You signed the papers last week." Matt looked at her, his eyes searching hers for an anchor. He was so weak, so desperate for help, that he accepted her reality over his own. I did," he stammered. "I guess I forgot." "My head feels so heavy, Rachel." "See," Rachel said, turning back to me with a triumphant, sharp smile. "He is very confused, Dad. That is why he needs absolute quiet. Stress makes his heart rate spike. And having guests, unexpected guests, is very stressful for him." She was kicking me out. She knew that I was getting too close. She was using his illness as a shield to protect her lies. "Come on, honey, let's get you back to bed," she said to Matt, guiding him away from me. "You need to lie down before your noon medication." Matt looked back at me, his eyes full of apology and pain. "Sorry, Dad," he whispered. I am just not myself. It took every ounce of willpower I possessed not to tear her away from him right then and there. But I knew I could not. If I made a scene, if I accused her now without hard proof, she would paint me as the crazy, senile father-in-law. She would ban me from the house forever. And then Matt would be alone with her. I had to play the long game. I understand, I said, my voice sounding like gravel. You rest, son. Rachel stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at me. Her face was a mask of polite hostility. I think you can let yourself out, Ben, she said. And next time, please call first. We would hate for Matt to have an episode because you surprised him. I watched them ascend the stairs. I watched her guide my dying son deeper into the belly of that cold, expensive beast of a house. I walked to the front door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. As I stepped out into the blinding sunlight, I realized the magnitude of what I was up against. This was not just greed. This was a calculated, cold-blooded execution. Matt truly believed he was sick. He accepted his decline because he trusted the woman who slept beside him. He was drinking poison from the hand of the person who vowed to love him. I climbed into my truck and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I looked back at the house one last time. You think you have won, Rachel, I whispered to the silent facade. You think I am just a stupid old man who will go away. I started the engine. But you forgot one thing. You can fool a husband who loves you, but you cannot fool a father who remembers when that boy was small enough to fit in one arm. I built this life with sweat and blood, and I will burn it all down before I let you take him from me. I drove away, leaving the mansion behind, but taking the cold, hard truth with me. I needed help. I needed someone who could navigate this web of lies better than a bricklayer. I reached for my phone. It was time to stop asking questions and start finding answers. It was time to stop being a father and start being a detective. That night, the silence in my apartment was heavy enough to crush a man. I lay on my mattress, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, listening to the drip of the faucet in the kitchen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Matt's face. I saw the gray skin and the hollow eyes. I saw him stumbling in his own home, a prisoner of a lie that was eating him alive. I could not sleep. Sleep felt like a betrayal. How could I rest when my son was slowly dying a few miles away? I got up and paced the small room. My back ached, a dull throb that never really went away, but I ignored it. I needed answers. I needed to know who this enemy was. I knew how to lay bricks and pour concrete, but I did not know how to navigate the digital world. I did not know how to search databases or cross-reference medical boards. I was a man of the analog age, trying to fight a crime committed in the digital era. I looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. I grabbed my phone and dialed Miguel. He answered on the second ring, his voice groggy but alert. He knew I would not call this late unless the world was ending. I need help, Miguel, I said. I need your niece, the one who works with computers. Miguel did not ask questions. He just asked for 20 minutes. Half an hour later, Miguel and his niece Sarah were sitting at my small kitchen table. Sarah was a sharp girl, barely 25, with glasses and quick fingers. She opened her laptop and the blue glow of the screen illuminated our anxious faces. Tell me everything, she said, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I told her the name, Dr. Schneider. I told her about the holistic detox. I told her about the nanomedicine that cost $5,000 a month. I told her everything. Rachel had spat at me with such confidence. Sarah started typing. The clicking of the keys was the only sound in the room. It sounded like a machine gun firing in the distance. Miguel and I sat in silence, watching the reflection of the code and text dancing in her glasses. I felt useless. I was a man who built skyscrapers, yet here I was helpless in front of a plastic box, waiting for a young girl to tell me if my son had a future. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I watched Sarah's expression, First she looked focused, then she looked confused. Finally she stopped typing and sat back in her chair. She took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "Ben," she said softly, "I have looked everywhere. I checked the state medical board. I checked the National Registry of Cardiologists. I even checked the university research databases for any new clinical trials involving nanomedicine for heart defects." She looked at me and her eyes were full of pity. "There is no cardiologist named Dr. Schneider in the entire state of New York," she said. "There is a Dr. Schneider in Manhattan, but he is a plastic surgeon. He does nose jobs and liposuction for celebrities. He does not treat heart conditions." I felt the air leave my lungs. A plastic surgeon. The irony was bitter. Rachel had picked a name she probably saw in a magazine while she was planning how to kill her husband. And the medicine, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The nano protocol." "It does not exist," Ben Sarah said, shaking her head. "There are papers on nanotechnology, sure, but nothing like what she described. There is no FDA-approved treatment. There is no $5,000 monthly pill. It is all made up. It is science fiction." Miguel slammed his hand on the table, making the salt shaker jump. "She made it all up," he growled. "The doctor, the pills, the cost. It is all a phantom." I sat there frozen. The confirmation hit me harder than the suspicion. Suspecting she was lying was one thing. Knowing she had invented an entire medical reality to deceive my son was another. It was sociopathic. It was cold. It was calculated. Sarah closed the laptop. I thanked her, and Miguel walked her out, giving me a squeeze on the shoulder before he left. I was alone again. I sat in the dark, and the rage began to cool into something harder, something sharper. It turned into clarity. I started to think about the money. $5,000 a month. That was $60,000 a year. Where was that money going if not to a doctor? And then, like a dam breaking, the memories came flooding back. I remembered the last few years. I remembered the changes I had seen in Rachel, but had been too polite or too blind to question. I remembered a Sunday afternoon 6 months ago. I had gone over to fix a leaky faucet for them. Rachel came home carrying bright orange shopping bags, Hermes. I did not know much about fashion, but I knew that name. I knew those bags cost more than my truck. She had laughed it off, saying it was a knockoff she bought in Chinatown. But the leather smelled rich. The stitching was perfect. It was no knockoff. I remembered the car. She had traded in her practical sedan for a luxury SUV with heated leather seats and a panoramic roof. She said it was for safety. She said Matt wanted her to be safe on the road. I remembered the tea parties she hosted. I had seen photos on social media, photos that friends showed me because I did not have an account. Tables laden with champagne, caviar, and expensive pastries. She was living the life of a socialite. She was playing the part of the wealthy housewife. And all the while I was sitting here. I looked around my apartment. I looked at the instant noodle cup sitting in the trash. I looked at my worn-out boots by the door. I looked at the patch on my work jacket. I was eating ramen noodles and working 70 hours a week to pay for a storage unit for my tools because I had given them every penny I had. I had given them $200,000, my life savings, my blood and sweat. And where did it go? It did not go to the house. It did not go to Matt's health. It went to her vanity. She was bleeding him dry. She was siphoning off the money he earned, the money I gave them, and she was spending it on herself. But that was not enough for her. Matt was sick. He was slowing down. He could not work as hard as he used to. He was becoming a burden. He was becoming a dragging anchor on her lifestyle. So she decided to cut the rope. But she could not just divorce him. If she divorced him, she would get half, maybe less. And she would lose the sympathy. She would lose the status of the grieving widow. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. She wants it all, I whispered to the glass. She wants the life insurance. She wants the house. She wants the freedom. And she wants my son in the ground so she can play the victim. She is a gold digger. But she is worse than that. A gold digger just takes your money and leaves. Rachel is a black widow. She takes your money, smiles in your face, and then watches you die while she checks the balance in her bank account. I thought about Matt's pale face again. I thought about how he thanked me for the water, his hand shaking. He loved her. That was the tragedy of it. He worshipped the ground she walked on. He was working himself to death, literally, to pay for the fake medicine she was using to kill him. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It was hot and angry. I wiped it away with my calloused thumb. I was done crying. I was done feeling sorry for myself. I was done feeling like the stupid poor father. She thought she was smart. She thought she had covered her tracks with fancy medical terms and a fake doctor. She thought I was too old and too simple to figure it out. She underestimated me. She forgot that before I was a bricklayer, I was a man who protected his family. She forgot that you do not build a skyscraper without knowing how to find the cracks in the foundation. And she was full of cracks. I turned away from the window. I grabbed a notepad and a pencil. I sat down and started to write. I wrote down everything. The dates, the lies, the fake doctor's name, the cost. I needed proof, hard proof. The word of an IT girl and the taste of flour would not hold up in court, and it certainly would not convince Matt. He was too deep under her spell. If I went to him now, he would think I was jealous. He would think I was losing my mind. No. I needed to catch her in the act. I needed to find the money trail. I needed to find the murder weapon. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Tomorrow was Wednesday. Rachel had a standing appointment at the spa every Wednesday afternoon. She called it her self-care time. She usually left the house empty for 3 hours because the maid did not come on Wednesdays. I felt a cold resolve settle over me. "I am coming into your house, Rachel," I said to the empty room. "I am going to walk through the front door, and I am going to tear your little world apart from the inside out. You took my money. You took my son's health. But you will not take his life. Not while there is breath in this old man's body." I turned off the light, but I did not go back to bed. I sat in the dark watching the sun slowly rise over the city, waiting for the time to strike. The investigation of the old bricklayer had just begun. Wednesday arrived with a gray sky that matched the concrete I had stared at all my life. I parked my rusted truck 2 blocks away from the gated community, hidden behind a row of neatly trimmed hedges that cost more to maintain than my monthly rent. I checked my watch. It was 1:30 in the afternoon. According to the schedule I had pieced together from overhearing phone calls and watching their social media, this was Rachel's sanctuary time. Every Wednesday, she spent 3 hours at a high-end spa getting facials and massages, polishing the skin of the woman who was poisoning my son. I watched through the windshield, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. At 1:45, the garage door opened. Her white SUV slid out like a shark entering the water. She was wearing large sunglasses and a scarf, looking every bit the grieving wife, preparing for a funeral that had not happened yet. I waited until her taillights disappeared around the curve of the road before I started my engine. I drove up to the house, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs that felt dangerous for a man of my age. I grabbed my toolbox from the passenger seat. It was heavy, filled with wrenches and pipe cutters, tools of honest labor that I was about to use for a dishonest entry. I was not a burglar. I was a father. But today, the line between the two was blurring. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. I knew the maid Maria would be there. She was a good woman, hard-working, terrified of Rachel. I prayed she would be the one to answer. The door opened, and Maria's anxious face appeared. She looked surprised to see me. Mr. Ben, she whispered, glancing behind her. Mrs. Rachel is not home. I know, Maria, I said, forcing a warm smile that felt like a mask on my face. I am actually here to help. Matt told me the sink in the master bathroom was draining slow. He asked me to take a look at it while Rachel was out so I would not disturb her. You know how she hates the noise of tools. It was a gamble. I was banking on the fact that something in that big house was always broken, and that Maria would be relieved to have someone fix it without her getting blamed. Maria hesitated, biting her lip. She is very strict about guests, Mr. Ben. I am not a guest, Maria, I said, lifting the heavy toolbox. I am the free plumber. Plus, I want to surprise Matt by fixing it before he gets home. Please. She softened. She stepped back and held the door open. Thank you, Mr. Ben. You are a good father. Her words stung. If only she knew. I walked past her, the smell of lemon polish and stale air filling my nose. I headed straight for the stairs, my boots feeling too loud on the hardwood. I will be in the master bath, I called out. I climbed the stairs, but I did not go to the bathroom. I went straight to the home office. It was a room Rachel had claimed for herself, calling it her command center. It was where she managed the household accounts, or so she said. The door was closed. I turned the handle gently. It was unlocked. I slipped inside and closed the door softly behind me. The room was dark, the heavy velvet curtains drawn tight. It smelled of her perfume, a cloying scent of jasmine and vanilla that used to seem pleasant, but now made my stomach turn. I moved quickly to the large mahogany desk. My eyes scanned the room. Where would she hide it? A woman like Rachel, arrogant and comfortable, would not bury her secrets deep. She would keep them close, like trophies. I started with the desk drawers. Locked. I pulled out a thin metal pick from my toolbox. I had learned a few things on construction sites over 40 years, and opening cheap desk locks was one of them. I worked the pick into the keyhole, sweating not from exertion, but from fear. If Maria walked in, if Rachel came back early, it was over. Click. The drawer slid open. It was full of receipts, spa treatments, designer clothes, jewelry. The numbers were staggering. $300 for a cream, $2,000 for a handbag. But these were just signs of greed, not murder. I needed more. I closed the drawer and looked around. In the corner of the room behind a decorative silk screen, I saw it. A wall safe. It was a digital keypad model, sleek and modern. My heart sank. I could pick a physical lock, but I could not hack a computer. I walked over to it, feeling defeated. I reached out to touch the cold steel panel, and the door moved. It rattled. I froze. I pulled the handle. The heavy door swung open an inch. She had not locked it. Whether it was arrogance or just carelessness, she had left the door slightly ajar. Maybe she had been in a rush to get to her massage. Maybe she thought no one would ever dare enter her sanctuary. Her laziness was my salvation. I pulled the door open fully. Inside, there were stacks of cash rubber-banded in thick rolls. There were velvet jewelry boxes. But on the bottom shelf, sitting on top of a leather binder, was a thick envelope. I reached for it. My hands were trembling so badly, I almost dropped it. The paper felt heavy, expensive. I unwound the red string closure and pulled out the documents. Life insurance policy. The words were printed in bold black letters at the top. I scanned the pages, my eyes darting frantically. I needed the numbers. I needed the terms. And then I saw it. The number that put a price tag on my son's head. Benefit amount $5 million. I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. 5 million. That was why she needed the fancy car. That was why she tolerated me. She was waiting for the payout that would set her up for life. I flipped the pages, reading the fine print. My eyes burned as I read the clauses. Clause 4, a suicide. In the event of death by suicide within 2 years of policy inception, the benefit is null and void. Clause 4b. Natural causes. In the event of death by natural causes including pre-existing medical conditions not previously undisclosed, the full benefit shall be paid to the primary beneficiary. I lowered the paper. It all made sense. The puzzle pieces slammed together with a terrifying clarity. If she poisoned him with arsenic or cyanide, the autopsy would find it. It would be a homicide investigation. She would get nothing but a prison cell. If she drove him to suicide, the insurance company would not pay a dime. But if he died of a heart attack, if his weak, defective heart just stopped beating because he was not taking his medication, that was natural causes. That was a tragedy. That was a $5 million check handed to the grieving widow who had done everything she could to save him. The flower. The fake doctor. It wasn't just to save money. It was to ensure he died naturally. She was effectively unplugging his life support while holding his hand and telling him she loved him. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me, hot and acidic. I covered my mouth to keep from retching. Suddenly, I heard the vacuum cleaner roar to life in the hallway. The sound was close. Too close. Then the handle of the office door turned. I did not think. I moved on instinct. I shoved the papers back into the envelope and threw it into the safe. I pushed the safe door until it looked like it was before. I dove across the room towards the large walk-in closet, just as the office door creaked open. I squeezed myself into the narrow space between a row of winter coats and the back wall. The closet was dark and suffocating. Fur coats and wool trenches pressed against my face. They smelled of cedar and that same sickening jasmine perfume. I held my breath. My heart was beating so loud, I was sure it would give me away. Maria walked into the room. I could hear the vacuum nozzle bumping against the baseboards. She was humming a soft tune. She moved closer to the closet. I saw the shadow of her feet under the crack of the door. Please, I prayed silently. Please do not open this door. She stopped right in front of the closet. The vacuum whirred a deafening mechanical scream. I closed my eyes, picturing Matt's face. I imagined him as a little boy trusting me to catch him when he jumped off the porch. Now he was falling and I was hiding in a closet while his wife cut his parachute strings. After what felt like an eternity, the vacuum sound moved away. The office door closed. The room went silent. I waited another 5 minutes, sweating in the dark, breathing in the scent of the woman who wanted my son dead. I felt a cold hatred crystallizing in my chest. It was no longer just anger. It was a mission. I slipped out of the closet. I went back to the safe. I took the envelope out again. This time I did not just read. I pulled out my phone. I took photos of every page. I photographed the beneficiary name, Rachel Montgomery. I photographed the suicide clause. I photographed the date the policy was signed, just 3 weeks after they got married. She had been planning this since the honeymoon. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I wiped the handle of the safe with my sleeve to remove fingerprints. I checked the room to make sure I had left no trace. I walked out of the office, down the stairs, and into the master bathroom. I spent 10 minutes banging a wrench against the pipes under the sink, making enough noise to justify my presence. Then I walked down to the kitchen. "All done, Maria," I said, my voice steady though my insides were shaking. It was just a loose washer. "Thank you, Mr. Ben," she said, smiling. "You are a lifesaver." I walked out to my truck. I sat there for a moment, looking at the photos on my phone. The screen was small, but the evidence was massive. My son was not a husband to her. He was an asset. He was a piggy bank that she was waiting to smash open. She had calculated the return on investment for his life, and she had decided it was time to cash out. I started the engine. The old truck roared to life, a rough, angry sound. "You made a mistake, Rachel," I whispered, gripping the wheel. "You left the door open. And now the wolf is inside." I drove away from the mansion, leaving the cold luxury behind. I had the evidence of the motive. Now I needed the evidence of the weapon. I needed the pills. I needed to catch her swapping them. And I knew exactly how to do it. The sun was setting as I drove back to the city, casting long shadows across the road. But for the first time in weeks, I did not feel lost in the dark. I had a light. It was the burning fire of a father's vengeance, and it was going to burn Rachel's house of lies to the ground. I sat in my truck for a long time, staring at the photos on my phone. The image of the insurance policy was clear, but I knew it was not enough. In the eyes of the law, a motive is not a crime. Being greedy is not illegal. If I went to the police now, they would tell me it is a civil matter. They would say I am just a disgruntled father-in-law upset about money. I needed the weapon. I needed the physical proof that she was swapping the pills. I needed to find where she hid the real medication. I knew she would not leave the real pills in the open. She was too careful for that. They were likely hidden somewhere deep in that house, somewhere Matt would never look. To find them, I needed time. I needed to be inside that house when no one else was there, or at least when they were asleep. But I had returned the spare key Matt gave me months ago because Rachel claimed they needed it for the dog walker. I was locked out. I needed a key, and I knew exactly how to get one. It was a gamble, and it required me to swallow every ounce of pride I had left. I had to use the one thing Rachel despised most about me against her: my poverty and my frailty. I drove back to my apartment building. I parked the truck and walked up the 3 flights of stairs. When I got inside, I looked around. The place was already a mess, but I made it worse. I pulled a few drawers open. I kicked a pile of laundry onto the floor. I wanted it to look chaotic, like the home of an old man losing his grip. I went to my junk drawer and dug out an old set of keys. They were for a job site I worked on 10 years ago. Rusty, heavy, and useless. I put them in my pocket. Then I lay down on the floor next to my bed. I twisted my body into an awkward angle, mimicking a fall. I took a deep breath, preparing myself to play the role of the pathetic victim. I dialed Rachel's number. It rang 4 times before she picked up. "Hello," she said, her voice clipped and impatient. "Rachel." I groaned into the phone. I let my voice crack and tremble. I made it sound wet with pain. "Rachel, help me." There was a pause, not of concern, but of annoyance. "What is it, Ben? I am in the middle of getting dressed for a dinner." I fell, I wheezed. I was trying to change a light bulb. My back. "I cannot move, I cannot get up." "Call 911, then," she said dismissively. "No," I cried out, injecting panic into my voice. "No ambulance. I cannot afford it. Please. I just need help getting to the chair." I tried calling Matt, but he did not answer. "Of course he did not answer," she snapped. "He is resting. You know he cannot be stressed with this right now." I know, I sobbed. "I am sorry, but I am scared. I am all alone here. Please, Rachel. You are the only family I have." Silence stretched on the line. I could practically hear her rolling her eyes. I knew she was calculating the time it would take versus the social capital she would lose if she let her father-in-law rot on the floor. "Fine," she sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. "I am coming, but I only have 20 minutes. Do not move." I hung up and let a grim smile touch my lips. She was coming. I stayed on the floor for 30 minutes. The floorboards were cold and hard against my hip, reminding me of the very real aches I lived with daily. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the satisfaction of the trap snapping shut. I heard her car before I saw her. The aggressive honk as she locked her luxury SUV outside my building echoed up from the street. Then came the sound of her heels clicking on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, reluctant. The door flew open. She did not knock. She stood there in the doorway, framed by the peeling paint of the hallway. She was wearing a cocktail dress that probably cost more than my entire apartment building. Her hair was done up in an elaborate bun, and she was clutching a designer handbag. A Birkin, I think they call it. The bag was large leather and heavy. "Oh my God," she said, looking at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "It smells like old soup in here." I reached a hand out to her. "My back, Rachel." It seized up. She didn't take my hand. Instead, she stepped gingerly over a pile of dirty laundry, holding her breath as if the air in my home was toxic. She looked around for a place to put her precious bag. The table was covered in mail. The sofa was stained. Finally, she placed the bag on the only clean chair in the room, the wooden one by the window. She walked over to me and grabbed my arm. She did not help me gently. She hoisted me up with a strength that surprised me. For a woman who claimed to be so delicate, she had a grip like a vice. "You really need to be more careful," she scolded as she dragged me toward the bed. "Matt does not need this burden right now. He has enough to worry about without his father falling apart." I sat on the edge of the bed, groaning, clutching my lower back. "I am sorry," I whispered, keeping my head down. "I am just so thirsty. I have been on the floor for an hour. Could you get me a glass of water?" She huffed, blowing a stray hair out of her face. "Fine. Where are the glasses?" "In the kitchen," I pointed. "In the cabinet above the sink. You have to let the water run for a minute, or it comes out brown." She made a face of absolute revulsion. "Brown water? You cannot be serious." She turned on her heel and marched into the kitchenette. The wall separated the sleeping area from the kitchen, so she was out of sight. I heard the faucet squeak open. I heard the pipes groan. This was my chance. The moment she was out of view, the act dropped. I moved with a speed that would have shocked her. I lunged from the bed to the wooden chair. Her bag was open at the top. It was chaotic inside, filled with makeup, a wallet, and a phone. I dug my hand in. My calloused fingers brushed against silk and leather. Where are they? I heard the water running. I heard her muttering to herself about how disgusting my sponge was. Got them. My fingers closed around a heavy ring of keys. I pulled them out. There were 3 keys, one for the car, one for the front door, and a smaller one probably for the mailbox. I reached into my own pocket and pulled out the dummy set I had prepared. They were roughly the same size and weight. I dropped my old keys into her bag and shoved her keys deep into my pocket. I scrambled back to the bed and sat down, clutching my back just as the water turned off. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I took a deep breath, forcing my face to relax into a mask of pain. Rachel walked back into the room holding the glass of water with 2 fingers, as if the glass itself was contagious. "Here," she said, thrusting it at me. "Drink it fast. I have to go." I took the glass with a shaking hand. "Thank you, Rachel. You are an angel." She looked at her watch. "I am late. The gala starts in half an hour, and I smell like mildew now." She walked over to the chair and grabbed her bag. My breath stopped. She swung the bag over her shoulder. The weight shifted. She paused for a microsecond. I watched her face. Did she feel the difference? Did the jagged edge of my old keys poke through the leather differently than hers? She adjusted the strap. She looked at me one last time. "Do not call us tonight, Ben. Matt needs to sleep. And if you fall again, just call the landlord. I cannot keep doing this." She turned and walked out. The door slammed shut behind her. I sat there staring at the closed door. The glass of water was still in my hand. I poured it onto the floor. I stood up. My back pain was gone. The fatigue was gone. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the cold metal keys. They glinted in the dim light of the apartment. I had done it. I had the key to the castle. She was going to a gala. That meant she would be gone for at least 4 or 5 hours. But Matt would be home. I could not go now. I had to wait. I needed to wait until the dead of night. I needed to wait until the sedatives she gave Matt kicked in and knocked him out. I needed to wait until she was asleep, confident in her safety, confident in her victory. I walked over to the window and watched her SUV pull away from the curb. She drove fast, eager to escape my world and return to hers. She had no idea that she was carrying a useless set of rusty keys in her $5,000 bag, and she had no idea that the man she left sitting on a dirty mattress was about to become her worst nightmare. I looked at the keys in my hand. One of these opened the front door. But I wondered what else they opened. Did she have a key to the safe on this ring? Did she have a key to a secret drawer? I would find out. I went to the closet and pulled out my dark work clothes. I put on a beanie to cover my white hair. I looked in the mirror. I did not look like Ben the grandfather. I looked like a thief. I looked like a criminal. But sometimes to catch a criminal, you have to become one. I checked my phone. I sent a text to Miguel. I have the keys. Meet me at the corner of Oak and 4th at midnight. Bring the flashlight. I sat down to wait. The hours ticked by slowly, each second stretching out like a rubber band about to snap. I thought about Matt. I thought about the poison he would swallow tonight with his dinner, thinking it was medicine. Hold on, son, I whispered into the darkness. Just hold on one more night. Daddy is coming, and I am bringing the truth with me. The streetlights were humming overhead, casting long yellow shadows across the driveway. It was midnight. The air was crisp and cold, biting at my exposed skin, but I was sweating. I sat in the cab of my truck with Miguel watching the house. It was dark, silent, and imposing. It looked like a mausoleum. We knew they were gone. I had seen the invitation on the kitchen counter earlier that day. It was a charity gala for the Heart Association. The irony was enough to make me sick. Rachel was dragging my dying son to a party to raise money for heart disease while she actively destroyed his. I could only imagine Matt right now, pale and trembling in a tuxedo that was too big for him, trying to smile for the cameras while his chest tightened with every breath. She was parading him around like a tragic prop to garner sympathy before the final act. "Let us go," Miguel whispered. He was right. We could not wait any longer. We stepped out of the truck and moved through the shadows. I felt like a criminal. I was 70 years old, a man who had never even gotten a speeding ticket, and here I was creeping through the bushes of my son's estate to break into his home. I reached the front door. My hand shook as I pulled the stolen key from my pocket. It felt heavy like a weapon. I slid it into the lock. I held my breath. Click. The sound was loud in the silence of the night. The door swung open. We stepped inside. The house smelled of stale air and that cloying jasmine perfume. It was pitch black. "I will watch the street," Miguel said, his voice low and steady. "Go. Do what you have to do." He stayed by the window, peeking through the blinds like the soldier he used to be. I moved deeper into the house. I knew exactly where I was going. I went up the stairs, my boots making no sound on the plush carpet. I reached the master bedroom. The door was open. I walked in and turned on the small flashlight I had brought. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the massive king-sized bed. This was the room where my son slept next to his executioner. This was the room where he lay awake at night, wondering why he was dying. I started with the nightstand on Matt's side. Nothing but a glass of water and a book he had not opened in months. I moved to the bathroom. I checked the medicine cabinet. Just the fake bottles. The ones filled with flour. I moved to Rachel's side of the room. I looked at her dresser. It was a beautiful piece of furniture, antique white wood with gold handles. I felt a wave of revulsion. I did not want to touch her things. I did not want to know the secrets of a woman like that. But I had no choice. I opened the top drawer. Jewelry, watches, passports. I opened the second drawer. Scarves, gloves. I opened the third drawer. It was filled with lingerie, silk and lace, expensive things that seemed frivolous and cruel considering her husband was withering away. I felt my face heat up with shame and anger. I began to sift through the fabric, feeling for anything hard, anything that did not belong. My hand brushed against something at the very back of the drawer. It was a bundle, something wrapped tightly in a heavy silk scarf. I pulled it out. It had weight to it. I placed it on top of the dresser and unfolded the silk. My heart stopped. There, glistening in the beam of my flashlight, were 3 amber bottles. They were sealed. They were real. Nitroglycerin. The label was clear. The expiration date was good. The prescribing doctor was Dr. Evans Matt's old cardiologist. She had filled the real prescriptions. She had gone to the pharmacy, paid for the life-saving medicine, and then brought it home and buried it under her underwear. She was hoarding the cure while feeding him the poison. I stared at the bottles. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It was not just that she wanted him dead. It was that she had the power to save him right here within arm's reach, and she chose every single morning to deny him. I grabbed the bottles. My first instinct was to run. I wanted to take these to the police station. I wanted to slam them on the desk and scream that she was a murderer. But then I stopped. I thought about the police. I thought about the law. If I went to them now, what would happen? Rachel would cry. She would say she hid them because Matt was abusing them. She would say she was rationing them for his own good. She was a master manipulator. She would twist this. She would turn me into the villain, the crazy old man who broke into her bedroom and stole her husband's medication. And Matt would believe her. He was so brainwashed, so weak, he would take her side. No. I needed something undeniable. I needed Matt to see the truth with his own body. I looked at the real bottles. Then I looked at the bathroom where the fake pills were kept. I formulated a plan. It was dangerous. It was reckless. But it was the only way. I opened the sealed bottles of real medicine. The pills were small white, identical to the fake ones in shape. I went into the bathroom. I grabbed the weekly organizer and the large refill bottle of the fake nanomedicine. I emptied the flour pills into the toilet and flushed them away. The water swirled, taking the lies down the drain. Then I took the real nitroglycerin pills. I filled the organizer, Monday through Sunday. I filled the refill bottle. I walked back to the bedroom. I put the empty amber bottles back in the silk scarf. I wrapped them up exactly as I had found them. I shoved the bundle back to the bottom of the lingerie drawer under the lace and silk. I stood back and looked at my handiwork. To the naked eye, nothing had changed. The house was the same. The pill organizer was full. The secret stash was hidden, but everything had changed. Tomorrow morning, when Rachel handed Matt his pill with a glass of water and a fake smile, she would not be poisoning him. She would be saving him, and she would not even know it. I walked out of the bedroom. I felt a strange sense of calm. The trembling in my hands had stopped. I went downstairs. Miguel was waiting by the door. "Did you find it?" he asked. I nodded. "I found it, and I fixed it." Miguel looked confused, but he did not ask. We slipped out of the house and locked the door behind us. We walked back to the truck under the cover of darkness. As we drove away, I looked back at the house one last time. "Sleep tight, Rachel," I whispered. "Enjoy your gala. Enjoy your champagne. Tell everyone how sad you are about your husband's failing heart. Because tomorrow, the game changes. Tomorrow, Matt is going to wake up. He is going to take that pill, and hour by hour, day by day, the color is going to come back to his cheeks. The strength is going to return to his legs. The fog in his brain is going to lift, and you are going to watch it happen. I could imagine the terror that would slowly creep into her eyes. She would see him getting better, and she would not understand why. She would panic. She would wonder if her flour supply was tainted. She would wonder if he was secretly seeing another doctor. She would start to crack. And when she cracked, when she realized that her victim was refusing to die, that is when I would strike. That is when I would reveal everything. I touched the pocket where my phone was. I had the photos of the insurance policy. Now I had the knowledge of the hidden stash. I am not just a father anymore, I thought, as the city lights blurred past me. I am the judge. I am the jury. And soon, very soon, I will be the executioner of your greed. Get ready, son. Your father just bought you a second chance at life. Do not waste it. 3 days. That is how long I waited. 3 days of agonizing silence where every minute felt like an hour, and every hour felt like a lifetime. I went back to work at the construction site, hauling bricks and mixing mortar, but my mind was miles away in that cold, sterile mansion. Every time my phone vibrated in my pocket, my heart would seize up. I was terrified. Had I made a mistake? Had I miscalculated the dosage? Was I going to get a call from the coroner telling me that I had killed my own son with my amateur medical intervention? I slept with my phone taped to my hand. I ate with it on the table next to my fork. I was a man living on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the wind to either push me off or pull me back. It was Friday around noon when the call finally came. I was sitting on a stack of drywall eating a sandwich that tasted like sawdust. I saw Matt's name flash on the screen. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the worst. I prepared myself to hear Rachel's fake sobbing voice telling me that Matt had passed away in his sleep. I slid my thumb across the screen. "Hello?" I answered, my voice tight and strained. "Dad." The word hit me like a physical blow, but it was not the sound of a dying man. It was not the wheeze of a ghost. It was a boom. A deep, resonant baritone. It was the voice of the high school linebacker I used to cheer for in the stands. It was the voice of my son before the sickness took him. "Dad, are you there?" he asked, sounding almost giddy. I gripped the phone, tears instantly welling up in my eyes. The relief was so intense it made my knees weak. "I am here, son," I managed to choke out. "You sound different." "I feel different." Matt laughed. It was a genuine laugh, loud and full of breath. "Dad, I do not know what is happening. I woke up this morning and it was like a heavy blanket had been lifted off my chest. I can breathe. I mean really breathe. I walked the dog around the block twice and I did not even break a sweat. I closed my eyes and looked up at the gray sky, thanking a God I had not spoken to in years. It was working. The nitroglycerin was opening his arteries. The blood was flowing. My boy was coming back to life. "That is amazing news, Matt," I said, playing the part of the surprised father. "Maybe the new treatment is finally kicking in." "Yeah, maybe," Matt said, but he sounded doubtful. "But Rachel said the detox takes weeks to work." "I do not know, Dad. I just know that for the first time in 6 months, I do not feel like I am dying. I actually feel hungry. I am going to make a steak." And then I heard it. The background noise. The context that tells you more than words ever could. I heard Matt turn away from the phone. I heard him speak to someone else in the room. "Rachel, look at this. I can lift the cast iron skillet with one hand. My grip is back. Isn't it a miracle?" There was a pause, a beat of silence that hung heavy over the line, and then a crash. It was the sharp, shattering sound of ceramic hitting a hard floor, a plate or maybe a bowl smashing into 1,000 pieces. "Rachel," Matt cried out. Are you okay? I pressed the phone harder against my ear, straining to hear her reaction. I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the sound of a murderer realizing her victim was walking out of the grave. I heard her voice. It was trembling. It was high-pitched and jagged with panic. You are lifting that," she stammered. Her voice was faint, but I heard every syllable. How? How is that possible, Matt? You should be in bed. The doctor said the second week of the cycle is the hardest. You should be weaker, not stronger. She was not happy. A wife whose husband just recovered from a terminal illness should be crying tears of joy. She should be shouting hallelujah. But Rachel sounded like she had seen a ghost. She sounded terrified. "I feel great, honey," Matt said, oblivious to the terror in her voice. "I think the doctor was wrong. I think I am healed." "No," she snapped. The mask was slipping. I could hear the sharp edge of control returning to her voice. "No, Matt. This is the surge. It is a false recovery before the crash. You need to sit down. You need to take your pill right now. Give me the bottle." I smiled a cold, hard smile. "Go ahead, Rachel. Give him the pill. Give him the medicine I planted. Every time you try to poison him now, you are only making him stronger." I hung up the phone. I did not need to hear anymore. I had my answer. The trap was working. Rachel was scared, and a scared enemy makes mistakes. I sat there for a moment feeling a sense of triumph I had not felt in years. I had saved him. I had bought him time. But my victory lap was cut short by a notification on my phone. It was an email. The subject line read, "Confidential Investigation Report. Subject M. Montgomery." My stomach turned over. This was the report from the private investigator I had hired 3 days ago. I had to go to a very bad part of town to get the money for this. I had borrowed $5,000 from a loan shark named Frank, a man who broke legs for a living. I promised him double back in a month. It was a desperate move, but I needed to know everything. I opened the email. I expected to find photos of Rachel with another man. I expected to find a secret bank account in the Cayman Islands. I scrolled past the first few pages of standard data. And then I stopped. The text blurred before my eyes. The section was titled Gambling Debts and Liabilities. There, in black and white, was a list of online casinos and sports betting sites. And next to them were the numbers: -20,000, -50,000, -80,000. Total outstanding debt, $300,000. I stared at the screen, my mouth dry. The name on the accounts was not Rachel. It was Matt. My son. My responsible, hard-working accountant son. He was a gambling addict. I felt like the ground had opened up and swallowed me whole. The triumph of 5 minutes ago evaporated. I read the summary from the investigator. Matt had been secretly gambling for 2 years. He had lost everything. He had maxed out his credit cards. He had taken out personal loans. He was drowning. Suddenly, the picture shifted. It twisted into something even more grotesque. Rachel was not just killing him for greed. She was killing him for survival. She knew. She had to know. A wife knows when $300,000 disappears. She was not just stealing his life insurance to get rich. She was using his death to wipe the slate clean. If Matt died, the life insurance would pay off the gambling debts, pay off the mortgage, and leave her with millions. She was cashing in a broken asset. My son was not just a victim. He was the architect of his own vulnerability. He had dug a hole so deep that his wife decided it was easier to bury him in it than to help him climb out. I felt a wave of anger at Matt. How could he be so stupid? How could he gamble away his life, my savings, his future? But then the anger faded into a profound sadness. He was sick. Gambling is a sickness just like heart disease. And instead of helping him, instead of getting him therapy or counseling, Rachel saw an opportunity. She saw a way to turn a liability into a windfall. She was still the monster. Matt was a fool, yes, but being a fool is not a capital offense. He did not deserve to die for playing poker. I looked at the phone again. The debt was bad, but there was something else in the report. A note at the bottom. Note: several large payments have been owed to a legitimate collection agency, but the majority of the debt is held by offshore unregulated entities. These are dangerous creditors. My blood ran cold. Unregulated entities. That meant loan sharks. That meant the mob. If Matt owed $300,000 to criminals, they would not care if he was sick. They would come for him. And if he couldn't pay, I realized then that the clock was ticking faster than I thought. Rachel was racing against time. She needed him to die from natural causes and get that insurance payout before the loan sharks came to break his kneecaps. She was trying to beat the mob to the kill. I stood up, dusting the drywall powder off my pants. The game had changed. It was no longer just about saving Matt from his wife. It was about saving him from the consequences of his own sins. I needed to move fast. I had the medical proof. Now I had the financial motive. But I needed a confession. I needed to break them. I looked at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, my son was eating a steak, feeling alive for the first time in months, completely unaware that he was standing in the crosshairs of two different loaded guns. "I am coming, son," I whispered, "and I am going to save you from her, and I am going to save you from yourself, even if it kills me." The vibration of the phone in my pocket felt different this time. It did not feel like a notification or a call from a friend. It felt like a warning buzzer going off in a cockpit before a crash. I was standing in the shadow of a half-built high-rise, wiping the grit from my forehead when I pulled the device out. It was a text message from an unknown number. There were no words of greeting, no introduction, just an image and a single sentence. The image was a photo of me. It was taken from across the street of my apartment building. In the photo, I was walking out of my front door looking tired and old, carrying a bag of groceries. The timestamp on the photo was from yesterday evening. The text underneath read simply, "Pay what is owed, old man, or we start taking pieces of him, starting with his fingers." My blood turned to ice. I dropped the grocery bag in the photo, and I almost dropped the phone in reality. They were watching me. The invisible monsters that my son had summoned were no longer just names on a credit report. They were real. They were close. And they knew exactly who I was. I sat down heavily on a stack of pallets, my legs suddenly unable to hold my weight. I looked at the message again. The threat was specific. Fingers. These were not banks sending polite letters. These were not credit card companies calling during dinner. These were wolves. I thought back to the private investigator's report I had read on my screen just hours ago. The numbers had been shocking, but I had been too focused on the total amount to really understand the nature of the debt. Now, with the threat of violence staring me in the face, I forced myself to look at the truth of my son. Matt was a good boy. He was the kid who saved his allowance to buy me a tie for Father's Day. He was the teenager who never stayed out past curfew. He was the accountant who balanced his checkbook to the penny. How did that boy become a man who owed $300,000 to underground gambling rings? I scrolled back through the investigator's file looking for the trigger. I looked at the dates of the first large bets. 2 years ago. The timeline matched perfectly. It started 3 months after I sold my house. It started 3 months after I gave him that check for $200,000. The realization hit me harder than any physical blow could. I closed my eyes and let out a shuddering breath. He did not gamble because he was greedy. He gambled because he was guilty. I remembered the look on his face when I handed him that check. He had cried. He had hugged me and whispered that he would pay me back. He promised he would buy me a better house one day. He felt the weight of my sacrifice. I had given him my retirement, my security, my everything. And that weight had crushed him. He must have turned to online poker or sports betting, thinking he could turn a few $1,000s into a fortune. He thought he could win enough to buy me a house and free himself from the guilt of taking my money. He was trying to be a good son in the worst possible way. But the house always wins. And when he lost, he chased the loss. And when he lost more, he borrowed. And when the banks said no, he went to the people who break fingers. My heart ached for him. He was a fool, but he was a fool who loved me. He had destroyed his life trying to fix mine. But then the dark logic of the situation began to click into place. I looked at the threat on my phone again. They wanted money. They wanted their $300,000. And then I thought of Rachel. Suddenly the picture shifted. The pieces of the puzzle I had been holding, the fake medicine, the life insurance policy, the gambling debt, they all snapped together to form a terrifying image. Why would a wife kill a husband who owes money? If Matt dies, the debt does not just disappear. Usually the creditors come after the estate. They come after the spouse, unless the death is worth more than the debt. I did the math in my head. The life insurance policy was for $5 million. The gambling debt was $300,000. If Matt lived, they were ruined. The sharks would come. They would take the house. They would take the cars. They would expose Matt's addiction to his firm, and he would lose his job. They would be destitute, and Rachel would lose her social standing. She would be the wife of a broke, unemployed gambling addict. But if Matt died of a tragic, sudden heart attack, the insurance company would cut a check for $5 million. Rachel could pay off the loan sharks quietly. She could keep the house. She could keep the cars. She would be the grieving, wealthy widow of a man who died too young. She would be free. She was not just killing him out of malice. She was killing him as a business decision. She was liquidating a distressed asset. But there was another layer to this, a layer that made my stomach churn. Did she know about the threats? She had to. These people do not just text the father. They harass the wife. They probably sent her photos of Matt sleeping. They probably threatened her safety too. And that is why she was rushing. That is why she invented the fake doctor and the flower pills. She was in a race against the executioners. She had to kill Matt before the loan sharks did. Because if the loan sharks got to him first, if they beat him to death in an alley or broke his skull, it would be a murder investigation. The police would get involved. The insurance company would delay payment. The suicide clause might even be triggered if they made it look like he took his own life. Rachel needed him to die cleanly. She needed him to die in his sleep, or in his favorite chair clutching his chest. She needed a natural death to unlock the vault. I looked at the text message again. Time is up. She knew time was up too. That is why she was panicking when Matt started to get better. His recovery was not just an inconvenience. It was a disaster for her timeline. Every day he got stronger was a day closer to the sharks arriving at the front door. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. I had been playing a medical game, swapping pills and waiting for him to recover, but I did not realize that we were standing on a train track with a locomotive barreling down on us. I could not just wait for the nitroglycerin to work anymore. I could not just wait for Matt to realize he felt better. The wolves were circling the house. I stood up. I put the phone back in my pocket. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. My son was trapped between a wife who wanted to stop his heart and a criminal underworld that wanted to break his bones. He was walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers, and he was blindfolded. He did not know he was eating flour. He did not know his wife had priced his death, and he probably thought he could still swing one big hand to pay off the debt before anyone found out. He was wrong. I walked to my truck. I needed to get to him. Not to sneak around, not to swap pills, but to stand between him and the monsters. I checked the glove compartment. I had a tire iron in there. It was heavy, rusted, and solid. It was not a weapon of war, but it was a tool of a builder. And today I was going to use it to dismantle their threats. I am not just saving you from a heart attack, Matt, I whispered as I started the engine. I am saving you from the consequences of your love for me. I pulled out of the construction site, the tires kicking up dust. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the city. The game of cat and mouse was over. The hunt had begun, and I was no longer the prey. I slammed my foot onto the gas pedal and my old truck roared in protest as I sped toward the gated community. I did not care about the speed limit. I did not care about the red lights. All I cared about was the text message burning a hole in my pocket and the terrifying realization that my son was out of time. The sun had set, plunging the city into darkness, but in my mind I saw only fire. When I turned the corner onto their street, I saw them. A black sedan with tinted windows was parked 3 houses down from Matt's driveway. It sat there like a hearse waiting for a body. 2 men were sitting inside, the glow of cigarettes illuminating their hard faces. They were the sharks. They were the reapers, sent to collect on a debt that my son could never pay. I did not stop. I swerved my truck into the driveway, blocking the entrance, making my presence known. I grabbed the tire iron from the passenger seat. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of a father who is about to go to war. I ran to the front door. It was unlocked. I expected silence. I expected to find intruders. But what I heard was far worse. I heard screaming. It was a guttural, animalistic roar coming from the back of the house. It was the sound of a man in pure agony, but it was not physical pain. It was the sound of a soul breaking. I gripped the tire iron and ran down the hallway. My boots thudded against the marble floor, echoing the pounding of my heart. I burst into the kitchen. The scene before me froze the blood in my veins. The kitchen island was covered in shattered porcelain. Plates, bowls, glasses all swept onto the floor in a violent rage. And in the middle of the debris stood Matt. But this was not the frail, dying man I had seen 3 days ago. This was a man possessed. His face was flushed with color, his chest was heaving with powerful breaths, and his eyes were wide, manic, and bloodshot. In his right hand he gripped a large chef's knife. He was not pointing it at Rachel. He was pointing it at himself. Rachel was on the floor, huddled in the corner by the refrigerator. She was sobbing, her hands covering her face, her body trembling so violently I could hear her heels clicking against the tiles. She looked small. She looked broken. Matt screamed again, a sound that tore through the air. Why am I still alive? He swung the knife through the air, slashing at nothing but his own demons. I looked at my watch. Rachel, I checked my pulse. It is 60 beats per minute. 60. It is strong. It is steady. Why is it beating? Matt, I shouted, stepping forward, raising my hands. Put the knife down, son. Matt spun around. He looked at me, but I do not think he saw his father. He saw a witness. He saw an obstacle. Get out, he roared, spit flying from his lips. You are not supposed to be here. Nobody is supposed to be here. Matt, look at me, I said. My voice steady despite the chaos. The loan sharks are outside. I know about the debt. I know everything. We can fix this. No, Matt laughed, a high hysterical sound that made my skin crawl. You cannot fix this. Nobody can fix this. The only fix was the funeral. The only fix was the check. He turned back to Rachel, ignoring me. He loomed over her, waving the knife dangerously close to her face. You promised me, he hissed. You swore on your life, Rachel. We practiced this. The timeline was perfect. Tuesday was the day. I was supposed to go into cardiac arrest on Tuesday. The autopsy would show natural causes. The money would be in the account by Friday. He kicked the refrigerator door. So why am I standing here feeling like I could run a marathon? Where is the flour, Rachel? Where are the placebo pills? My breath caught in my throat. The world tilted on its axis. The narrative I had built in my head for the last week shattered into a million pieces. I looked at Rachel. She was not the mastermind. She was not the Black Widow. She was the victim. Rachel looked up, her face streaked with mascara and tears. She looked at Matt with eyes full of terror and love, a heartbreaking combination. I could not do it, she sobbed, her voice breaking. I am sorry, Matt. I could not do it. You what? Matt screamed, stepping closer. I switched them, she cried out, clutching her chest. I saw you fading away, Matt. I saw you getting gray and weak, and I could not stand it. I went to the stash. I took the real medicine. I put it back in the bottle 3 days ago. I wanted you to live. I cannot let you die for money. I stood there stunned. Rachel thought she had saved him. She thought her act of defiance 3 days ago was the reason he was better. She did not know that I had already switched the pills days before that. She did not know that I was the reason he was alive. But her confession revealed the truth of her heart. She had agreed to his insane plan, but when it came down to the wire, she chose her husband over the money. Matt did not see it that way. You stupid woman, he groaned, dropping his head into his hands, the knife dangling loosely by his side. You just killed us all. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a despair so deep it looked like a bottomless pit. Dad, do you know what you walked into? Do you know what she just did? She saved your life, I said, my voice trembling. No, Matt whispered. She signed my death warrant, and hers, and Lily's. He walked over to the counter and slammed his hand down on a piece of paper. I saw the logo of the gambling site. $300,000, Dad. That is what I owe, and the people I owe it to. They do not take payment plans. They take blood. They told me if I did not pay by the end of the month, they would take Lily, my daughter, my baby girl. He began to cry, great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. I had a plan, Dad. It was a perfect plan. I have a $5 million policy. If I die of natural causes, everybody wins. Lily goes to college, Rachel keeps the house, you get your money back, and the bad men go away. He looked at me, pleading for understanding. I am worth more dead than alive, Dad. I am just a screw-up who lost everything. But dead I am a hero. Dead I am a provider. He turned to Rachel, his anger gone, replaced by a broken hopelessness. I begged you, Rachel. I begged you to help me go. I am too coward to do it myself. I needed you to give me the flour. I needed you to let me sleep. Why did you have to love me so much? Rachel crawled across the floor and wrapped her arms around his legs. Because you are my husband, she wailed. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the house. We can run, we can hide. But I cannot bury you, Matt. I cannot. I dropped the tire iron. It clattered loudly on the floor, breaking the spell of their misery. I looked at my son. The boy I had raised. The boy I had protected from scraped knees and schoolyard bullies. He had grown up to build a prison for himself out of lies and debt, and he had tried to check out of it the only way he knew how. He was not a villain. He was a desperate, drowning man who thought the only life raft big enough to save his family was his own coffin. And Rachel. I had judged her. I had hated her. I had called her a monster in my mind. But she was just a terrified wife bullied and manipulated by a husband she adored, forced into a pact she never wanted to make. She was the one who had been carrying the weight of his suicide note every single day, feeding him the poison he demanded until her heart finally broke and she chose to save him against his will. I walked over to Matt. I grabbed the knife from his hand. He did not resist. He was empty. I tossed the knife into the sink. I grabbed Matt by the shoulders. He was taller than me now, but in that moment he felt like a child. "You listen to me," I said, my voice low and fierce. "You are not a check. You are not a policy number. You are my son." I looked at Rachel. "Get up," I said gently. "Get up, Rachel." She stood up, shaking, wiping her face. I looked at both of them. The ruined kitchen, the shattered glass, the broken dreams. "You think this is over?" I asked. "You think because the plan failed, you are dead?" Matt nodded, tears streaming down his face. "They are outside, Dad. I saw them. They are going to come in here, and they are going to hurt us. Let them come," I said, a cold resolve settling in my gut. I turned to the door. I have spent 40 years building things that stand up to storms. I have spent my life working with concrete and steel, and I will be damned if I let a couple of thugs in a sedan tear down my family. I looked back at Matt. "You wanted to save this family by dying. That is the easy way out. Now you are going to do the hard thing. You are going to live, and we are going to fight." I pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had sworn I would never call again, a number that belonged to a past I had buried deep. "Frank," I said when the line connected, "I need a favor, and I am willing to sell my soul to get it." I hung up. I looked at Matt and Rachel. "Clean this mess up," I ordered. "We have company coming, and they are not the loan sharks." I walked to the front window and stared at the black sedan. The wolves were waiting, but they did not know that the old construction worker in the house had just called in a dragon. The silence that followed my phone call to Frank was heavy enough to crush the breath out of us. The kitchen was a ruin of shattered porcelain and shattered lives. I stood over my son and my daughter-in-law, my chest heaving, the adrenaline slowly turning into a deep, aching sorrow. Matt was sitting on the cold tiles, his head in his hands, his body shaking with the aftershocks of his hysteria. Rachel was next to him, gripping his arm as if she was afraid he would float away if she let go. I looked at them. I did not see criminals. I did not see conspirators. I saw two terrified children who had gotten lost in the dark woods of the adult world. Matt looked up at me. His eyes were red and swollen, rimmed with the dark circles of a man who had not slept peacefully in months. He looked at me with a mixture of shame and defiance, the look of a boy who knows he has done wrong but believes he had a good reason. "Why did you stop me, Dad?" he whispered, his voice cracking. It was the only way out. It was clean. It was perfect. I knelt down in front of him, ignoring the pain in my bad knees. I wanted to be on his level. I wanted to look him in the eye. "Tell me," I said softly. "Tell me why. And do not lie to me, Matt. Not anymore." Matt took a shuddering breath. He reached into the back pocket of his jeans and pulled out a folded, crumpled piece of paper. He smoothed it out on the floor with trembling fingers. It was the beneficiary page of the life insurance policy. The same one I had seen in the safe, but I had missed the most important detail because I was too blinded by my suspicion of Rachel. He pointed to the names at the bottom. "Look, Dad," he said. "Look who gets the money." I looked. There were two names listed under primary beneficiaries, Rachel Montgomery and Benjamin Montgomery. The split was 50-50, $2.5 million for Rachel. $2.5 million for me. I stared at my name typed in that official black font. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had thought Rachel was stealing the money. I had thought she was the villain. But my son had put my name there. He had planned to die so that I could be rich. "I did it for you, Dad." Matt choked out, tears streaming down his face again. "You sold your house for me. You gave me every penny you had. You are living in that rat-hole apartment eating instant noodles because of me. I see you, Dad. I see how tired you are. I see you limping when you think nobody is looking. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, acting so much like the little boy I used to know that it broke my heart. I wanted to buy you a house, he continued, his words spilling out in a rush. I wanted to pay you back with interest. I thought I could make some quick money on the crypto markets. I thought I could double your savings in a month. But I lost it. I lost the first 50,000 in a week. And then I panicked. I tried to win it back at the virtual blackjack tables. And I lost more. And then I borrowed. He looked down at his hands, the hands of an accountant, soft and uncalloused, so different from mine. I dug a hole so deep I could not see the sky anymore, Dad. I am $300,000 in debt to bad people, but I am worth 5 million dead. Do the math. It is the only investment I have left that pays out. I listened to his twisted logic. I listened to the monstrous calculus he had performed on his own life. He had weighed his heartbeat against a bank balance and decided he was worth more as a corpse than as a father and a son. You are not useless, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I am, he shouted, suddenly angry. I am a failure. I lost your retirement. I endangered my wife. I am nothing but a burden. If I die, you get $2.5 million. You can retire, Dad. You can move to Florida. You can fish every day. You never have to lift a brick again. And Rachel pays off the sharks and keeps the house for Lily. Everyone is happy. Everyone wins. He looked at me with a desperate hope, begging me to validate his sacrifice, begging me to agree that his death was a good business deal. You have to let me go, Dad, he whispered. It is the only way I can be a good son. It is the only way I can pay you back. I felt a heat rise up in my chest. It was not anger at the gambling. It was not anger at the debt. It was a furious, burning rage at the idea that my son thought my love was transactional. He thought I gave him that money as a loan. He thought he had to buy my affection. He thought his life was a currency he could trade to make me comfortable. I stood up. I felt a surge of energy that I had not felt in 20 years. Stand up, I commanded. Matt looked confused. He stayed on the floor. I said, stand up! I roared, my voice echoing off the marble walls. Matt scrambled to his feet, looking terrified. He stood before me, slumped and broken. I looked at him. My beautiful, foolish boy. I thought about the days I held him when he was a baby, promising to keep him safe. I thought about the days I taught him to ride a bike. And now he was trying to sell himself for parts to pay me back. I pulled my hand back and I slapped him. It was not a gentle tap. It was a hard, stinging slap across the face. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet kitchen. Rachel gasped. Matt stumbled back, holding his cheek, his eyes wide with shock. He stared at me. I had never hit him in his life. Not once. You are an idiot, I shouted, grabbing him by the lapels of his shirt and shaking him. You are a complete and total idiot. Matt was too stunned to speak. You think I want money? I yelled, shaking him again. You think I want to sit in a mansion in Florida while my son is in a box in the ground? You think I sold my house for an investment? I sold it because I love you. I gave you that money because I wanted you to have a life, not because I wanted a return. I felt the tears running down my own face, now hot and salty. I do not care about the money, Matt. I do not care about the $200,000. Burn it. Throw it in the river. I do not care. I can live in a box under a bridge, and I would still be happy if I knew you were alive. I let go of his shirt. He stood there trembling, the red mark of my hand blooming on his pale cheek. You are not a check, Matt, I said, my voice dropping to a fierce whisper. You are my son. You are the only thing I have left of your mother. When she died, she made me promise to look after you. And you want to kill yourself to buy me a condo. I took a step closer to him. I need you. I do not need a new truck. I do not need a vacation. I need my son. I need to know that you are walking around on this earth. I need to see you grow old. I need you to raise your daughter." Matt's face crumpled. The mask of the martyr fell away, leaving only the scared little boy underneath. "But I messed up, Dad," he sobbed. "I messed up so bad. So what I said. So we fix it. We are men. We fix things. We do not quit. And we certainly do not die just to balance a ledger." I opened my arms. "Come here," I said. Matt collapsed into me. He buried his face in my shoulder and wept, his body shaking with deep, racking sobs. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him tight, feeling the thinness of his back, the fragility of his life. I held him like I used to hold him when he woke up from a nightmare. "It is okay," I whispered into his hair. "It is okay. I have got you. I have got you." Rachel crawled over to us and wrapped her arms around Matt's waist, burying her face in his stomach. We stood there, in the middle of the kitchen, a tangled knot of grief and love, 3 broken people holding each other up. I looked over Matt's shoulder at the dark window. The black sedan was still out there. The debt was still real. The danger had not passed. But something fundamental had shifted in that room. The lie was gone. The isolation was gone. Matt had thought he was alone. He had thought he was a burden. Now he knew he was the most valuable thing in the world to me. And that knowledge gave him something the false medicine never could. It gave him a reason to fight. I pulled back and looked him in the eye. I wiped a tear from his cheek with my thumb. "We are going to pay them," I said firmly. "We are going to sell this house. We are going to sell the cars. We are going to sell everything if we have to. But we are going to pay them, and you are going to live. Do you hear me?" Matt nodded, sniffing. "I hear you, Dad." "Good," I said. "Now wipe your face. Frank is coming, and we need to look like we are ready to do business, not like we are ready to die." I turned to Rachel. "Get the coffee," I said. Strong. We have a long night ahead of us. For the first time in months, I saw a spark of life in Matt's eyes. It was faint, but it was there. It was the spark of hope. And as long as that spark was there, I knew we had a chance. The money was gone. The luxury was gone. But my son was back. And that was a trade I would make 1,000 times over. I walked into the hallway and closed the door to the kitchen. I needed silence. I needed to compose myself because I was about to do the hardest thing I had ever done in my life. I was about to murder my own pride. The phone felt like a lead brick in my hand. I stared at the contact list and scrolled down to a name I had not looked at in 10 years. Frank. Frank was a real estate mogul. He was a billionaire who built glass towers that scraped the sky. He was also the most arrogant, difficult man I had ever met. I had been his foreman for 20 years. I ran his sites. I kept his crews in line. But we parted ways on bad terms. He wanted me to use cheap concrete on a foundation to save money, and I refused. I told him I would not build a tomb for someone else to live in. He called me a stubborn fool and fired me on the spot. I swore that day I would starve before I ever asked him for a crumb of bread. But I was not asking for bread. I was asking for my son's life. I looked out the window. The black sedan was still there. The cigarette smoke from the open window curled up into the night air like a venomous snake. They were waiting. If I did not fix this in the next 10 minutes, they were going to come inside. I pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I held my breath, praying he was still awake. "Hello?" The voice was gruff and sharp. It sounded like gravel crunching under a tire. "Frank." "It is Ben. Ben Montgomery." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the clinking of ice in a glass. "Well, well, the prodigal bricklayer returns." "I thought you were dead, Ben," or at least too proud to pick up a phone. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut. I need help, Frank. Frank laughed. It was a dry, humorless bark. Of course you do. Nobody calls me at midnight just to say hello. What is it? Did you get sick? Do you need a recommendation for a nursing home? I need money, I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to keep it steady. I need $300,000, and I need it tonight. The laughter stopped abruptly. 300 grand. You must be joking. You walked out on me over a $10,000 concrete pour, and now you want a fortune. Go to a bank, Ben. I cannot go to a bank, I whispered. I do not have time. Frank, please. It is life or death. My son is in trouble. Let me guess. Frank sneered. He is a junkie, or a gambler, and you are trying to bail him out. You always were too soft, Ben. You treat people like they are better than they are. He was right, and that made it hurt more. But I could not argue. I could not fight back. I had to surrender. I am begging you, Frank, I said. I felt my knees hit the floor. I physically knelt down in the dark hallway, clutching the phone with both hands. I am on my knees, Frank. I have never asked you for anything. I gave you 20 years of my life. I made you millions. Please, save my boy. What is in it for me? Frank asked coldly. I am a businessman, Ben. I do not run a charity for old foremen. I took a deep breath. I knew what I had to offer. I had nothing left but the one thing I had tried to retire. My body. I will work for you, I said. You are 70 years old, Ben, Frank scoffed. What can you do? I can work the night shift, I said quickly. I can be the night watchman at the downtown site. I can manage the inventory. I can do the cleanup. I will work for free, Frank. You can take my entire paycheck every week until the debt is paid. I did the math in my head. At minimum wage, it would take me the rest of my life. I was selling my remaining years. I was signing myself into slavery. I will work until I drop, I promised. I will never call in sick. I will never take a holiday. I will belong to you. Just send the money, please. There was silence again. I could hear a clock ticking in the background of his office. I could hear my own heart thumping against my ribs. You really mean it, don't you? Frank asked quietly. You would trade your freedom for a gambling debt. He is my son, Frank. There was a heavy sigh on the other line. You are a fool, Ben. You always were. You are honest to a fault and loyal to people who do not deserve it. But good help is hard to find these days, especially honest help. I waited. Fine, Frank said. I will wire the money to your old account. But tomorrow morning you show up at the site, 7 p.m. sharp. You are my night watchman. And Ben, you are never retiring. You are going to die in a uniform with my name on it. Do you understand? I understand, I whispered. Thank you, Frank, thank you. Do not thank me. Get to work. The line went dead. I stayed on the floor for a moment. I felt lightheaded. I had just sold the last dignity I had. I was no longer a retired father. I was a servant. I would spend my final years patrolling empty buildings in the cold instead of fishing or sleeping. But then my phone pinged. I looked at the screen. A deposit notification. $300,000. I stood up. My knees cracked. I felt every year of my age. But I also felt a surge of power. I walked back into the kitchen. Matt and Rachel looked up at me with terrified eyes. Give me the account number, I said to Matt. The offshore one. The one the sharks gave you. Matt fumbled with his phone and read me the number. I typed it in. I hit transfer. "It is done," I said. Matt stared at me. "What? What is done?" "The debt," I said, tossing my phone onto the table. "It is paid. Every penny." I walked over to the window and pulled back the curtain. I watched as the driver of the black sedan checked his phone. I saw him say something to the man next to him. I saw them look up at the house one last time. Then the engine started. The brake lights flared red, and the car drove away, slowly disappearing into the night. "They are gone," I said. Matt collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. Rachel buried her face in her hands. I looked at them. They were safe. They were free. But as I looked at my trembling hands, I knew that the bill for their freedom had just been sent to me, and I would be paying it every single night for the rest of my life. I had sold my sunset to buy them a sunrise, and as a father, I knew I would make that trade again in a heartbeat. The for sale sign did not stay on the lawn of the mansion for long. We sold it for less than it was worth, just to move the money quickly. We sold the luxury cars. We sold the designer handbags. We sold the watches. When the dust settled, we handed Frank a check that covered a significant portion of the debt, but not all of it. The rest hangs over us, a monthly reminder of the past, but we pay it together. Every month, Matt, Rachel, and I put our money into a pile and we send it to Frank. We are bound by debt, but for the first time in years, we are free from secrets. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment 3 blocks from my place. It is small. The paint is chipped in the hallway, and the radiator clanks in the winter. It is a far cry from the marble floors and the heated swimming pool. But when I go over there for Sunday dinner, the house is warm. It smells of pot roast and laundry, not cold air and fear. Matt is doing the work. He goes to therapy twice a week. He attends meetings for gambling addiction every Thursday night. He is learning to forgive himself, which is harder than paying back any amount of money. He works a modest job now doing bookkeeping for a small local business. It pays a fraction of what he used to make, but he sleeps at night. And Rachel. She surprised me the most. She did not run. She did not file for divorce when the money dried up. She put her hair in a ponytail, put on a pair of scrubs, and went back to the hospital. She works long shifts on her feet, emptying bedpans and checking vitals. Her hands are rougher now. She looks tired. But when she looks at Matt, she looks at him with eyes that see the man, not the provider. She learned the hard way that a husband in a small apartment is better than a widow in a mansion. It has been exactly 1 year since that night in the kitchen. I am 71 years old today. My back hurts more than it used to. The cold, damp air of the night shift settles deep into my bones. I am wearing a security guard uniform that is a size too big for me. I sit in the guard booth at one of Frank's construction sites, watching the monitors, drinking black coffee to keep my eyes open. Frank kept his word. He works me hard. He expects me to be here rain or snow. But sometimes when he drives past in his limousine, he nods at me. It is not a nod of friendship, but it is a nod of respect. He knows I am a man who pays his debts. I see headlights pull up to the gate. My heart does a little jump. It is an old sedan, reliable and dented. Matt steps out. He looks healthy. The gray color is gone from his skin, replaced by a ruddy complexion from walking to work. Rachel gets out from the passenger side, holding little Lily's hand. Grandpa Lily shouts, running toward the gate. I step out of the booth, my knees popping, and I scoop her up. She feels heavy and solid. She is the reason we did all of this. "We brought you dinner," Dad, Matt says, smiling. He hands me a plastic container. I open it. It is not a bento box. It is not sushi. It is not salmon and caviar. It is a ham and cheese sandwich on white bread with the crusts cut off just the way I like it. And a sliced apple. I look at the sandwich. It is the cheapest meal in the world. But as I take a bite standing there in the cold with my family, It tastes better than any banquet I have ever imagined. There is no poison in this bread. There are no lies in this meat. I look at my son. He is alive. He is breathing. He is standing tall. I have lost my retirement fund. I have lost my house. I have lost the easy, lazy twilight years I thought I had earned. I have to put on heavy boots and work while other men my age are sleeping in soft beds. I will probably work until the day my heart stops. But I look at Matt laughing with his daughter. I look at Rachel holding his arm. I look at the peace on their faces. I saved the soul of my son. I kept my family from shattering into a million pieces. I bought them a future with my own labor. And as a father looking at them, under the harsh light of the security lamp, I know one thing for sure. That was the best deal I ever made in my entire life. This story taught me that true wealth is not found in bank accounts, real estate, or the opinions of others. True wealth is the ability to look at yourself in the mirror without shame and to sit at a table with your family without secrets. We often destroy our lives trying to maintain an image of success, forgetting that dignity and honesty are the only currencies that truly matter in the end. A small home filled with truth is a palace compared to a mansion built on lies. If this story touched your heart or made you think about your own family, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us share these important lessons. And tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you would sacrifice everything for? I read every single comment, and I would love to hear your story. See you in the next video.